You ready?
Right now, yeah.
Okay, my name is Ed McTavish, spelling MC, capital Tavish.
Good. Okay. We're gonna let that run. Ed, tell me, how long have you been working with the museum and what your role is?
Well, I've been coming down this area for 10, 12 years because my sister and brother-in-law lived here, and we moved down here in '98. And I guess all the while I was coming down here visiting with family, I never paid much attention to this engine that was sitting here. But once we moved down here permanently, I was looking for new people, new friends, and I've always been interested in railroads, particularly modeling, but I was in the heavy construction business, so big, massive train issues always interested me. So I looked up the group here, and I was welcomed into the group, and I started being very active, and before I knew it, they said, well, we think you ought to be a board member because you're here all the time. So the history of the area fit in so well, and the interest that outsiders had visit here just was the kind of catalyst that you wanted to do more for the museum. Not being a native, of course, there was a lot of things that I didn't know about the Smoky Mountain National Park, but I'm learning, and we've got a lot of work to do here, but there's so many people, like for instance, just the other day, a man stopped by who was here a year ago and said, hey, I got a stove for that caboose out there, and I'll bring it by. And sure enough, here in the 2 days ago, he showed up with that caboose. I mean, with that furnace for the caboose, a little wooden stove, and it's sitting out on the porch. And
is it a caboose stove? Is it?
It's a caboose stove. It's a actual type of stove that was used in cabooses, and it was made here in a local area, Lenore City. And it's one of those things that people keep coming by and bringing the stuff that is meaningful to the museum and helps add to the interest. And the other thing we really enjoy doing, we get school groups that come in here, 20, 30 at a time, and of course all ages, some third grade on up, and we can hold their interest for about 10 or 15 minutes, but we try to get them involved and make them understand some of the things that went on in the past. And that's the neat thing about the museums of this type, and of course the Heritage Museum up the road, is that it brings people into something that they would probably never experience in their lifetime if it wasn't shown to them in the form that we do. And of course, our new shop building is going to be a big benefit, where we'll have more space to have people come and doings in our annual meeting and our conference room, and also the programs such as this one that we can further put something in print in a visual situation for people to use away from the museum. And I think that's important, that when they leave, they got something they can take with them and say, yeah, I've been there, I'm going to have to look at that again. So, all this type of activity that we have. And of course, it's hard to keep people working. Volunteers sometimes are difficult to come by, and there's usually a strong nucleus, like the people on the board, and we're constantly looking for extra people to help us out.
Good. How long have you been here or in the area? You said, I know you said
we physically moved here permanently in '98, but okay, been coming down here 10 or 12 years prior to that.
From where? Where?
Oh, from my founding days are Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I was born. And the last 25 years I lived in Michigan, St. Joe, Benton Harbor, right on Lake Michigan. Had a nice home there. And I worked for Clark Equipment, heavy construction machinery company, who no longer exists, but it was that love of big machinery, and also the interest that kept me going and getting really interested in the big engines rather than just the small model engines that I was used to using in the earlier days when I was growing up.
Do you bring any of the model engines here? Do you do exhibits? Like, I know I came last year, there was some kind of festival, or can you tell me like some of the events that you have?
Yeah, the last meeting we had, I don't believe we had anything here, but prior to that we have garden, as they call it, G-scale, set up out on a porch. Of course, the Shea engine, which is representative of the engine that we have. And we have a gentleman on the board by the name of Mark Furnham, and he has quite a bit of garden scale which he sets up. And so people coming for our Old Timers Weekend, the one they have in the spring and one in the fall.
Is it on a certain day? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
every year?
it's on it's basically the same dates in the spring and fall, and it creates a lot of outside interest and again a history. So we have things going on here. Well, we have live steam, the old Frick engine out here, which doesn't run, but we have a friend of the museum who has one that operates, and hopefully we're working on maybe this fall we'll get them in here, and that generates a lot of activity. The other thing we have is, in fact, I'm working on our own air tank. Gentleman by the name of Mark I was talking about, he brings his air tank and he's got 2 or 3 steam whistles. So we pump up that air tank and we can blow the whistles and people hear that. And we fudge a little bit. We build a little smoke smudge in the boiler smoke box of the engine out there, so there's smoke coming out of there. People think we got her steamed up. Man, they come in here and they're never disappointed to find out it wasn't, because, hey, well, I've been meaning to stop in here, and that was just the impetus to bring us in. So we do little things like that. Unfortunately, we don't have any live steam. In today's world, inspections and certifications and that are very difficult to come by. So, and I don't believe we'll ever have any of our items here steamed again. We do run the little Frick engine out in front on air. That will run on air, and so people see that turn around. And so we have a lot of fun on those 2 big weekends. And in the meantime, of course, we have different activities and with constant supply of kids, as I mentioned, coming to the museum, and school tours, and with the new museum down the road, the Heritage Museum, we get stopped by and then they head on down the road. So a little more interest in the area, and we've got the history and the roots of back in the early 1900s when it all started around here.
Okay. Would you, okay. Well, someone who knows nothing comes in and then they leave. What is it that you would hope that they would learn from the museum?
Well, the people that come by here, let's assume that they're not aware of the activity, the heritage of the area. We hope they can come to the museum here and learn something about how it all started here, how the National Park began, which was the Little River Railroad and Lumber Company had some bearing on that because of the transfer of properties, whatever. And of course, the president back then, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, helped from a political standpoint to get that job done to create the national park. Anyway, a lot of people don't know about it and how it was formed or whatever, and we just hope that they learn something. That, yeah, there were people here that worked hard. They worked on very severe conditions in the lumber companies up in the prongs, up in the mountains, and then after it was dissolved, was made into something for the whole country to enjoy. The national park to the area that we have preserved some of the roots. We have some older people here who are getting well on in age that come by and can reminisce, and I think they feel good that somebody has preserved something of their childhood and their early days when this area was just a simple, hard-working logging and lumber town. And the same thing existed a lot of places in the country, but I think the saving and the equipment and the pictures we have displayed in the museum helps people to understand what life was like 100 years ago.